In doing all my videos, well, all my interviews particularly, and all the emails that come in, I've had to have an open mind. You see, if you have a closed mind and people send you stuff and you just dismiss it out of hand, or you have an interviewee who's telling you something which it goes against your normal way of thinking or the way that you've been brought up, and again you dismiss it out of hand, or you just challenge it to the point where there is no point having the discussion because clearly you see things from a different point of view, then you're never going to learn anything, are you? And I think at this current time, with all the stuff that's been thrust on us since 2020 particularly, but even before then, when we saw things like 9/11 and some of the other bits and bobs that have been pushed down at us through mainstream media, we've needed to have an open mind to other people's suggestions. When we're brought up through school, through university, we're given what seems to be an authoritative way of looking at the world. We understand that there's this way and this is it, the only way. We're not really these days given a chance to question things or to have an open mind about things. And because of the prevalence of the mainstream media, and now of course social media and platforms such as YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble and all the others, we're seeing narratives continually being pushed which tell us how we're supposed to think. One of the most odious, it seems to me, is the advertising industry. Although they're advertising their products, it seems to me that they're also telling you how you're supposed to live, the lifestyle you're supposed to have, the opinions you're supposed to hold. And it is very difficult to stand against all of this and say, actually, is there another way of looking at things? And also, there's this whole business of there's only two ways of looking at things. For example, there's a lot of people who talk about these days, they talk about the flat earth, or they talk about the spherical earth, and it's this or that. It's kind of black or white. But is there maybe a third way, a different way of looking at things? Or is it just that, the North Pole or the South Pole, this way or that way? And sometimes you need to remove yourself from that argument completely and say, well, hold on a second. Are we being misled here? Maybe there's a different answer. And I think having an open mind at this time is absolutely essential. We've been told, for example, have we not, that the science is fixed when it comes to man-made global warming, that we're told the world is in this catastrophic state and that there is only one way of dealing with this, and that is things like the net zero agenda. But is it really true? Can we not have an open mind? Perhaps this is not the best way of doing things. Now, people watching my channel will know that I push back against all this nonsense anyway. I've got rid of my television altogether. I don't listen to the narrative. We're now being told that we're going to have wars again, as if war is the only answer to sorting out problems. But is it really? Is it really sensible to send men and women these days overseas into what they call the theatre of war, only to have them killed? And the people who seem to benefit from all of this are not the ones that have declared the war. Oh no, they don't go into the front line and start shooting at people and potentially getting shot themselves. No, they don't do that. They're the ones who seem to get the better out of it. And also the bankers, those that are funding these things. Having an open mind might suggest to you that although perhaps false flags are given and we're persuaded that we ought to do this because it's for our own good, having an open mind then suggests, hang on a minute, sending people to their death is perhaps not such a good idea after all. Maybe, and perhaps there ought to be, a peaceful resolution to some of these things. Another thing that we need to have an open mind with, I believe, is this whole legal system, the acts and statutes, as if to say that there is a bunch of people who sit in an old house that was built some years ago, the Houses of Parliament, let's say, and they come up with laws and rules that they think are the only way that we can run our lives by. And actually, when you look at it, that a lot of these are anti-human. They seem to be penalising the poor. They don't seem to be as good as you might imagine them to be. And there's no room for manoeuvre. So perhaps we need a much more open mind to the type of rules and regulations that we have. Perhaps we had some much better ones in the past in which our peers, such as in trial by jury, could look at the individual who perhaps has supposedly caused an offence. An offence. I mean, they say, don't take offence. Offence is really just a mild thing, isn't it? A crime is a different thing. Where's the victim? But with trial by jury, our peers are having a look at what we've done and suggesting whether you made an error, and indeed if you did, what the punishment would be. But also, is the rule that you're supposed to have made the error on actually worth having in the first place? Having an open mind is a way of looking at all these issues and saying, hang on a minute, let's not just go along because the mass number of people agree it. Because actually, when you think about it, how many people really have given these things a lot of thought? It's very easy to persuade a population to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh yes, this person is guilty, or this thing is the correct way of doing things, and not actually thought it all through by having an open mind, having a look at these things from different perspectives, and not just the polar opposite. We say that, well, it's either good or it's bad. Maybe there is somewhere else, a third way, somewhere in the middle, a different way of looking at things. Unless we listen to all the arguments, we can't make any conclusions. We can't make any ideas. It's sad when we saw going through the period in which we were all somewhat being frightened by the mainstream media and indeed the government, that when in March 2020 we all had to stay indoors because there was this supposed killer problem that was running around, that people just immediately, because the mainstream media, because all the other countries had done the same, we thought, oh, we better do it. And anybody who was saying, hold on a minute, let's just think about this, what are you doing? They were, of course, ostracised, cast out as being idiots, as conspiracy theorists. And that's a shame, because it turns out, of course, that the thing that we were told was so awful wasn't as awful as we were told and led to believe. And the solution that we were given, that everybody rushed to get because they panicked and didn't think and didn't have an open mind, turns out to be this thing that was pushed into people's arms, not really as useful or as beneficial as perhaps it should have been. Having an open mind would have prevented so many people from getting damaged from such a thing. Having an open mind to think about these things would have saved a lot of lives. People are very quick when somebody stands up and sets themselves against the tide of public opinion to be deemed an idiot. And yet, in time, as time passes, that person may turn out to be actually somebody who had a sensible point of view. They may not, of course, but having an open mind to consider the other point of view, I think, is a useful device for us. And in this times when any minute now we're going to get pushed onto other confusing things, other things that will perhaps persuade us that the mainstream is the right answer, having an open mind might be the answer, might be a way of looking at things and saying, let's not just rush to a conclusion. Let's look at this from different angles. Being open to different suggestions, that perhaps the world is flat, or perhaps the world is spherical, that perhaps the God is not exterior, that perhaps it's interior, that perhaps black is not completely black, that it's not just black or white, that there are different degrees, that there are perhaps dark forces working against us. Having an open mind that things are not quite as they seem to be, or as the government, or as the councils, or as mainstream media, or the police tell us they are, is probably very useful, and you never know, might help us out of some of the difficult situations that I am sure we are going to be persuaded are coming.